Good morning and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel and Dude on this Monday, the first day of March. Happy March, everybody. If it goes by, when I was in grade 2 and 3, we used to say, if March comes in like a lamb, it will go out like a lion. So far, looks like a lamb, but I don't know how correct that always was. Either way, every day we wake up, it's a good day to be alive. So here we are. Into our second week in Lent. I hope you're all doing well and keeping with your Lenten disciplines. This morning, I'd like to share with you again what the Lenten disciplines are, and then we'll talk about one of them. So these are coming, I'm reading these directly from the Ash Wednesday service from the Book of Alternative Services in the Anglican Church of Canada. And the celebrant, the priest, would say to folks, "I invite you, therefore, in the name of the Lord, to observe a holy Lent by self-examination, penitence, prayer, fasting, almsgiving, by reading and meditating on the word of the Lord, the word of God." So we've talked about self-examination and penitence and prayer and fasting. Today I'd like to talk to you about almsgiving. So that can be a touchy topic for a lot of people. The church having expectations about us and our money, Christians and their money. But I think we need to drop the whole thing about the church having expectations. Okay? There might be church people who would disagree with me. Probably all my treasurers over the years would disagree with me. But I think it's not really almsgiving. It is not so much about giving money to the church as our response to God for the gifts that God has so freely given to us. So, if you think about it, almsgiving is giving back to God, giving to the church. It's something that we have to choose to do. We aren't forced to do it. For the most part, I don't know of any place that sort of says, "We'll give you your paycheck after we've taken money from you." The government, but we are almsgiving to the government. Those taxes. Give unto Caesar the things that are Caesar, and unto God the things that are God. So this is the government taxes, that's to Caesar, and to God, that's almsgiving. So when we give to God, there are arguments about whether we should be giving from our net or our gross income, and I've never been able to keep those things straight. Business is not my thing. That's okay. It doesn't need to be. But I think that the biggest part isn't so much about which portion of our pay it comes from or income it comes from, as the fact that we have a heart that's willing to give and a mind that's willing to make a sacrifice. So part of almsgiving, we think about tithing. That's another big word in the church, in the Bible, not just the church. So tithing is giving back to God 10%. So if you think about things like the book of Ruth, when Naomi sent Ruth out to glean in the fields, she told her to go out and follow behind those who were harvesting, those who were gleaning, to follow along and pick up the things that got left. And the farmers were told by God, that the tradition was, that they would not gather up every single little piece of oat and wheat and every piece of fruit, that they were to leave things behind, so that people could come behind them. Those who were poor, those who were in need, could come behind them and glean for themselves. So in some ways, that was a tithe in itself. Then they also took a tithe to the temple, and they shared that with God as a thank offering, or the different kind of offerings they had. But the most important part there, I think, is that what they left behind for other people to come and to pick up. They didn't simply gather it all up. At the end of the day, take a little bit of what they, scoop out of every basket and put it in another basket and leave it by the edge of the field for those who were weak or tired or ill or, unable to just come and pick up the basket. The people were expected to go and do the work. They were expected to follow along. And in a way, that also showed a sense of humility, that you were still willing to do what you could, what you were able to do, which in many cases, in this case, would have been not much. They weren't able to be working in the harvest completely themselves, but they were still willing and able to go out and glean what was left over. There's a humility in that, not in looking at, well, we get the leftovers, There is a woman in the Bible who talks to Jesus about that and says, but he tells her he won't heal her daughter because she is not one of his people. And she reminds him that even the dogs get to pick up the crumbs under the table. And Jesus changes his mind. At that point, he says, well, wait a minute, you're right. Go, and your daughter's been healed. Your faith has made her well. Jesus begins recognizing and acknowledging publicly, it depends on how you want to understand what the gospel writer was doing, that his work, the ministry he was giving, that the harvest he was providing wasn't just for the chosen few, but for everyone. And that is fantastic. Apparently, I'm not breathing. I'm supposed to breathe now. That was fantastic. So the idea being that the crumbs are not meant to be looked at like in scorn, that, those are just the leavings we left for you. Those are the leavings we left for you so that you too could get healthy and you would be able to eat and provide for your family and then be able to come and work in the harvest. So that idea of picking up those things. So in some ways, our almsgiving is an opportunity for us to do that, because we aren't out, most of us aren't out in the fields, picking it up. And we don't, if we're farmers, have people coming after us and picking up the grains and stuff to keep for themselves. It's not the way it works anymore. But how do we do that? How do we provide for others? And one of the ways we do that is through almsgiving. How do we provide? How do we give? And what does that 10% do? The 10%, our tithe of who we are and what we give. Where does it go? Well, sometimes it goes to pay the bills at the church. Sometimes heat and hydro, for we have worship. We can have worship in warmth or in cool if you have air conditioning in summer. It helps to pay the priest's salary that the priest can then work. In lots of dioceses, the priest is given a stipend. The parish basically pays for the priest to live so that the priest can give their time to the church, to God. And that's a good way of looking at it, I think. But that tithe isn't just so that a business can survive. It is so that that business can take care of the people. So when we give our tithe to the church, we take care of course, our own heat and hydro and making sure we have wine and wafers for communion, and we have the books that we need and the PowerPoint or whatever it is we use for resources. We have a priest. We have we have the things that we need in the church that make it a church. But we also then give money for outreach. We take care of soup kitchens and food banks. We might contribute to a local hostel or a hospice. We might contribute to the food bank, as I said, in the community. We might contribute to, for instance, a CT scanner at the hospital. We also then contribute to our diocese. We contribute to our national church, and we contribute to the world. In this case, the Anglican Church of Canada, through the Primates World Relief and Development Fund, the PWRDF, helps other people around the world, just generally, but also in times of emergency. So our tithe, that which we give to the church, doesn't just simply pay the bills. It goes on, and it's like a ripple effect. It helps people close to home, but it helps people all the way around the world as well. Now, talking about tithing, Anglicans have a history with tithing. And something that my first supervisor shared with me, Peter Wall, was that there's something that we refer to as the Anglican Tithe. And I don't know how official it is, but I've heard it several places. The Anglican Tithe being 5%, that we give 5% of our income to the church, to the Anglican Church, our local parish, and we give 5% of our income to other things like the Cancer Society, the MS Society, ALS, helping kids out, whatever those things are that also call upon us to help our communities. And that's important, because that's one way that we help our communities as well. So if you look at tithing as 10% or an Anglican tithe as 5 and 5, it's up to you. I tithe 10% of my income after my taxes. It's just simpler that way. How much comes in, 10% goes back to the church. I haven't always done it. I've tried to do it. Sometimes I'm better, sometimes I'm not. But since I've been here, I've been trying hard to do that. Sometimes it would be easier not to financially for us, but every time it's the first thing I do when we get paid, as I write those checks to the church. And what that does for me is it reminds me that I can do this because God has given me the grace and the gifts to be able to share in alms. that God has given me the ability to give back to God, to give back to the church. And I always find that, you know what, at the end of the month, we have enough. We're okay. I also hope that I find ways to share in time and talent, as well as my treasure. So when we talk about almsgiving, we are talking about giving cash, giving money to the church, but we're also talking about the food we give to the food bank, the help that we give to someone else, the time that we spend reading as a reader or intercessor in a church service, playing music, the time that we offer as a scout leader or a brown owl for brownies, the time we spend as a hockey coach or the person who makes the snacks for the soccer team. These are all things that we give back to God in different ways. So during this Lenten season, I encourage you to really take a look at what almsgiving is in your life. How are you currently giving back to God what God has so freely given to you? And how can you do that with a more willing and graceful heart? And how can you maybe give a little bit more? Things to think about. Tomorrow we will talk about reading and meditating on the Word of God. We might just talk about reading and then talk about meditating on Wednesday. We'll see. But I hope you have a good day. God bless you. It's still a bit cold out there, so if you go out, stay wrapped up. Make sure you wear a mask because we want to keep everybody healthy. God bless you all. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachael.